Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with Alaska weather tonight. It is the 11th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your latest weather information from the National Weather Service. You can do that easily by calling us at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can always find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and if you can't find what you're looking for, please let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov. It's my pleasure to serve you any way I can, and I'm always happy to talk with you and help you find your weather information that can help you and your community anytime. Let's take a look at the weather advisories across Alaska today. We're going to start up north where winter weather advisories are posted. Actually, these are wind chill advisories, let me get that right, for the AKwx Pass region and regions south of Point Lay. Wind chill advisories there are issued when conditions turn pretty cold, and of course we're talking about levels right now that are in the depth of December, so anywhere from about 50 to 55 below for what it could feel like, which means frostbite's a pretty big issue too. In a short amount of time, you could freeze your skin pretty easily, so just be extra careful out there. Limit travel if you can, and for AKwx Pass and for areas from Point Lay southward, we expect to see improving conditions after about Wednesday afternoon. So for right now, tonight, all the way through tomorrow morning, midday tomorrow, and probably at least into about 3 o'clock or so, expect wind chill values to be around 50 to 55 below for the AKwx Pass area and again areas south of Point Lay on the Chukchi coast. Everything you see out west is a winter weather advisory. What that means is it's a winter storm, but not quite as bad as it could be. We're talking about areas around Anvik that have poor visibility and probably snowfall totals by the time it's all said and done of about 4 to 7 inches. So you're probably looking at about another 1 to 3 tonight. Out across the Bering Strait coast, we have two things going on. First of all, the wind. Those winds could be gusting out of the north around 50 miles per hour, and because of that, we expect to see a lot of wave run up onto the tops of the beach. So all the way to the top of the beach, expect some of those waves to break there. But no, we're not looking at coastal flooding, but just a lot of wave run up there. It does look like there's going to be winter weather continuing in the region as well. So on top of the gusty winds, limiting visibility, you're probably going to see another couple inches of snow around St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait communities there. So gusty winds out of the north, still looking at some open water in the region, but you'll want to see the sea ice map here in a minute because it is freezing up quickly. We're going to have snow, we're going to have wind, we're going to have poor visibility, and maybe some high surf there along the north-facing coastlines of St. Lawrence Island. So keep that in mind. A lot going on there across the western communities and across some parts of the Kuskokwim Valley there for tonight. Certainly some cold up north. The overall weather pattern is going to keep that cold and continue moving that into the interior. There are going to be some waves of snow working through the interior. Areas around Fairbanks have been seeing some of that. And we're also seeing a lot of active weather there across the north and eastern Gulf Coast. Periods of light snow have been falling across south central and southwest. And we're also seeing rain and wind across parts of southeast. We do expect to see some snow continuing around the Juneau area. That started up this afternoon. The big wind that was moving through Ketchikan has thankfully eased up a little bit. Gusts there approached, maybe even surpassed the 70-mile-an-hour mark yesterday. So pretty big blow working through southern parts of southeast. And it would be really a shame not to talk about this beautiful curl on the satellite picture there. That is another very potent area of low pressure working its way north and east into the Gulf. You can see that moving out of the central and eastern chain and away from the North Pacific and into the Gulf. This is going to be another fairly large weather maker across the Gulf Coast. We're looking at probably gales to storms. And again, that's heading for the central Gulf as we move toward the end of the week. So we are going to watch this storm fairly carefully. As you look up north, though, remember, this is nothing more than a vacuum cleaner, and it is quite literally pulling in cold weather into the interior, as many would like to see for this time of the season. It's been a fairly mild season so far. Folks in the interior and certainly up north with those wind chill values dropping down to 50 to 55 below, that is going to set the stage for a more normal period of cold across the interior and certainly across the west as we go. One more look at the loop and you can see there's a lot of these speckled kind of clouds here across the Gulf, certainly out across the west. One thing we're going to watch with this next wave moving into the Gulf is a broad area of convection, that is shower and thunderstorm activity developing across some parts of the Gulf, maybe as far west as Kodiak and as far east as the outer coast of southeast. So there is going to be an awful lot of lift and unstable air as this system approaches. Right now, the low is down to about 987 millibars. It will continue to deepen as we go into tonight. Periods of rain and wind across southeast, a little bit of snow around Juneau and points northward, a 969 millibar low with some snow around the western Kenai Peninsula. Your winter weather advisory has been dropped at this point. Out across the west, we're looking at the Bering Strait down toward St. Lawrence Island and the southwestern coast up toward Anvik again, where snow has been falling most of the day. Areas of snow and blowing snow up across the North Slope, and again with that wind, it may feel like 50 to 55 below. Going into tonight, low pressure is working into the northern part of the Kuskokwim and Yukon Delta and into southern parts of Norton Sound. And look how this pressure gradient is really packed in here. Again, the closer those lines get together, the stronger the wind has to blow to make this weather pattern work. And blowing snow will be an issue there, especially as that ice is freezing up a little bit more in the Chukchi Sea. Areas of fog, freezing fog up there across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, I should say ice fog. Blowing snow across some of the higher terrain there, and then snow is possible really all the way from Eagle down into the Susitna Valley and wrapping into Prince William Sound, parts of southeast. Look for that snow to continue to be an issue as we get into the evening and overnight hours there. And here's our low, 974 millibars, as it moves into the central Gulf. Rain out ahead and becoming more convective. That means those shower and thunderstorm opportunities are going to be growing. Out across the central and western chain, some wind on the south side of that, but most of all, it's just going to get colder across most of the Bering Sea. And that leading edge of colder air is advancing southward toward the central and eastern chain, the Bristol Bay region, as well as southwestern Alaska. And we maintain that really windy pattern here across the southern Chukchi and the Bering Strait region with that 986 millibar low. Blowing snow is still going to be an issue across the Brooks Range out toward the Kotzebue Sound region. Poor visibility is also expected across the north coast. Even though it won't be snowing so much, there could be some blowing snow in the region, so count on that as part of your day. Across the central and eastern Gulf, a low pressure core down to about 968 millibars by Wednesday afternoon. The front moving into southeast, and that's going to bring snow back into the northern parts of southeast and rain across the outer coast. But more than anything else, you're going to notice that wind coming right back up on Wednesday afternoon and into Thursday. Right now we're talking about some areas of considerable moderate for your aviation purposes there. Probably some strong gales and in some cases maybe some storm force winds. So watch for updates on that from the National Weather Service in Juneau. Across Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula into the Anchorage Bowl, continued waves of snow. None of these terribly strong or heavy, but enough that you could end up with another inch or two across the region. Higher terrain, of course, there will be more. Across the Alaska Peninsula, we also notice around Sand Point and northward, there's going to be some stronger winds blowing through the region as that pressure gradient tightens up. You should see some improvements there by Thursday, but notice how all the weather is kind of shifted into the northern Gulf now. We have the thunderstorm symbols showing up. That means areas of convection are possible with rain showers and possibility for some thunderstorms in the region. And notice that the front is banked right along the Alaska Range and just south. That is going to allow a tremendous amount of cold air to drop southward. And as it does so, it's going to really drop the temperatures there in places like Fairbanks and northward, where we still have a lot of wind blowing through. And that means those wind chill advisories could be extended into Thursday there if the wind stays up, because the cold will certainly be in place, as you'll see here in just a minute. And once again, the wind chill advisory is posted for the Anaktuvuk Pass region and south of Point Lay for values of 50 to 55 below, so certainly pretty cold. The wind looks like it's going to continue through the Bering Strait and over the Chukchi Sea and southward towards St. Matthew. So that probably means no matter if those waves are actually breaking on the beach there in St. Lawrence Island in the north-facing coast, you're still going to have some pretty choppy conditions out here where the ice has not filled in just yet. So something to consider there, especially along the north coast of St. Lawrence Island. Low pressure sitting across the Kuskokwim Delta at 990 millibars is going to keep that cold air funneled into the Alaska Peninsula and into Bristol Bay and into a large part of southwestern Alaska. And then out west, you can see a very broad area of low pressure just kind of hovering out there for the western Bering. It's also connected to another wave of low pressure. The first one has already made its way into the Gulf at this point, but remember on the satellite picture we just saw this exact same pattern here. The whole thing is going to kind of repeat itself as we get toward the end of the week. 963 millibar low there just south of the Aleutians in Adak and Atka with that stronger easterly flow developing all along the Pacific coast. Let's see what this does to all of your temperatures there. As we get into Wednesday morning, most of southeast will be at or just above freezing there, so temps in the lower to mid-30s. South central cooler than that, anywhere from the lower to mid-20s for most cases. Inland areas likely in the teens, 22 around Kodiak. Northward we go into the middle Tanana Valley, anywhere from 0 to about 5 below the AKwx Pass region. Actual temperatures holding around 20 below or so, with the wind chill values though about 30 degrees colder than that. Anywhere from 15 to about 30 below across the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temperatures from 5 to 10 below. Norton Sound temperatures 5 to 10 above, including Nome at 9, 13 around Savunga, 22 in St. Paul. Single digits for most of Bristol Bay until you get out toward the peninsula, and then temps warm up fairly quickly back into the mid to upper 20s. And Adak and Atka holding in the lower 30s there, with high temperatures there back in the upper 30s. As we get into southwest, anywhere from single digits to teens for most of the lower YK Delta region. 11 in Unalakleet, 9 in Nome. It looks like 3 below in Kotzebue though, anywhere from about 10 to 15 below for daytime high temperatures in the North Slope. Eagle, Northway in the single digits, also Fairbanks at 3, the Susitna Valley in the 20s, 28 in Kodiak. Haines, Skagway looking at temps in the upper 30s, lower 40s though the further south you go. As we get back into Thursday morning, we're talking about big cold, anywhere from 5 below to 25 below across the North Slope and the Chukchi Coast. 5 above in Nome. Southwest, King Salmon, Dillingham looking at single digits there. South Central in the teens. Back in the morning for southeast, anywhere from the mid to upper 30s there. Kodiak at 20. Daytime highs Thursday afternoon. Still looking at 15 below around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, 3 below in Fairbanks, about 1 below in McGrath, with south central temperatures back in the 20s, Cordova near 33.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation weather now. IFR conditions should be fairly widespread through the Yukon, especially the upper into the middle valley there in the upper Kuskokwim Valley. South Central is dealing more with marginal conditions tomorrow morning into Prince William Sound. IFR through most of the Wrangell-St. Elias region into northern parts of southeast. Most of southeast primarily dealing with marginal levels throughout the morning hours, and then across a large part of the west coast and a decent chunk of the Bering, including St. Paul and St. George. You're looking at MVFR conditions, maybe some VFR for the Chukchi Coast into the Kobuk and Noatak Range, and really Kotzebue Sound and northern parts of the the Norton Sound region of the Seward Peninsula, including Nome, starting out at VFR. You'll see that line kind of hovering very close to the region for the afternoon. Notice that IFR conditions will continue across the upper Yukon, and then most of South Central likely holding at marginal levels there. Southwest, you're still dealing with at least some marginal conditions as we get into the afternoon. VFR, though, starting to pop out around Lake Iliamna and just east of Hooper Bay and south around a little bit north of Bethel, and maybe including Bethel by the end of the day. For southeast, marginal conditions there will linger. Look for IFR across some of the Misty Fjords region and the higher terrain of southeast, and Adak and Atka popping out with some VFR in the afternoon. Thursday morning, widespread marginal conditions across the region. IFR a little bit harder to come by, but still around across some of the Brooks Range passes there, also across some of the higher terrain in southwest and through the Bering Strait, just about reaching St. Lawrence Island by the morning hours. We're also going to see a rapid area developing here for unstable weather, instability, the profile of the atmosphere that allows convection to occur, shower and thunderstorm activity, is going to become a lot more widespread here. So we're going to start that off in the morning closer to southeast and near Sitka and the central outer coast, looking for IFR across some of the higher terrain again. But watch what happens in the afternoon. This entire region starts to become unstable, and there's a much better chance for at least some shower activity to be widespread, and maybe even some thunderstorm activity out there. So keep that in mind as you're flying around. MVFR conditions across southeast, widespread across the interior, some breaks around Norton Sound and Nome again, and then to the west, considerable MVFR once again with IFR about Atkasuk and points southward and through the Bering Strait. Your pass conditions tomorrow look like this. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal levels really hovering all day long there. Lake Clark will likely stay at marginal levels, but Merrill Pass may be even worse at IFR throughout your Wednesday. So if you got to pick one, I'd say maybe Lake Clark would be a little bit better. The Rainy Pass, IFR in the morning, marginal conditions perhaps developing by the afternoon. Windy Pass probably doesn't have such a good story there tomorrow. IFR really all day long. Isabel Pass also expected to be instrument flight rule through most of your Wednesday. Mentasta Pass, marginal levels as the day goes. Maybe some improvement by the afternoon. Tanita Pass, we expect to see IFR with some improvements throughout the day, marginal levels there. Portage Pass probably starting at IFR with a little bit of improvement as your Wednesday goes, and then Chilkoot and White Pass also looking to hold at IFR, but rapid improvement the further south you go. Freezing levels shows a little bit of a jog in the surface freezing line from yesterday, hovering across the southern Bering and very close to St. George. You can see the levels drop south of Kodiak Island up to about Cordova, Yakutat, and Capital City, and then southward there, most of southeast, above freezing in the morning, but that 2,000-foot freezing line hovering right over the Dixon entrance. And that's going to keep our icing potential a little bit limited, generally above 2 to about 5,000 feet, with the greatest concentration of moisture right over southeast. That's still at isolated moderate levels. Don't see a whole lot more west of the Alaska Range until you get to Norton Sound, the middle Yukon and the upper Koyukuk. And then as you get into southwest, generally above 1 to about 3,000 feet, so levels certainly coming down a little bit further out in the west. The fast-moving river of air, the jet stream, is just flying down into the northern Gulf at 140 to maybe as strong as 180 knots at times, and a strong southwest flow into the north and eastern Gulf, and that's keeping low pressure here across western Alaska spun up. The fact that we have jet stream energy keeping that going is keeping this low pressure system organized and entrenched across southwest and the eastern Gulf. Levels there showing southerly winds coming in at 35, but you can see that west and northwesterly flow over the Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 35 to as strong as 50 knots, and some cases around the Haida Gwaii region, 70 knots. Winds across the interior are fairly light at this level, a little stronger at 3,000 with a northeasterly flow coming in at 25 to as strong as 30 there. But again, that west and northwesterly flow over the peninsula and into the Gulf ranks up to about 65 knots by the time it reaches land in parts of southeast. So turbulence is a factor. Considerable moderate will be the highest order of the day, but it's towing that line of isolated severe, so keep that in mind. Below 6,000 feet, a large part of southeast will have that. Barren Islands outside of Hitchinbrook entrance, the Alaska Peninsula, all below 4,000 feet there. Also the North Slope, at least some bumps below 3,000 feet, including St. Lawrence Island with considerable moderate. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become tsunami ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village. Yeah. What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest tsunami ready city is Seward.
Good.
You know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the the main players. But we've got several tsunami ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those. And, and they practice. They have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The tsunami ready signage is really blatant. It's this, blue and white curling wave sign, and there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, many communities sound their sirens daily, some sound them weekly, you know, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami's going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to hit every coastline. So, you know, it's not about when. It'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest, where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right, okay, all right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay, very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website, so, you know, just Tsunami Ready, and that'll get you there. And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay, all right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis.
No, they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964. Okay.
Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. I'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Packs.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Back with a look at your sea surface temperatures now. The very deep purple or dark blue color you see around St. Lawrence Island and coming through the Bering Strait indicates water that is ready to freeze. It may already have ice on it in some cases like over the Beaufort, but certainly the cooler temperatures here in Norton Sound and parts of the Bering Strait and around St. Lawrence Island and along the southwest coast indicate the water is now cold enough and ready to freeze if the wind will let up. Here's a zoomed in picture across the Bering Strait, and you can see marginal ice across areas north of the Bering Strait, around Diomede, Little and Big Diomede Island. Nothing yet around St. Lawrence Island, but there's a lot of growth inside of Kotzebue Sound and inside of Norton Sound. And as you look at the rest of the picture, you can certainly see how much this has changed just within the last week, and we expect that to continue as we go forward. Here, for the very latest information there from the Sea Ice Desk, you can always head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and read their outlook as well. Here's a look at the wind in southeast. It is going to be windy for the rest of the period across central and southern parts of southeast. Gusts there could reach upwards of 40 knots or so. Sustained winds 40 to 45 knots across the outer coast. You can see how sharply the winds are coming up the further south you go. 45 knots outside of Cross Sound with a 24-foot sea, 30-foot seas outside of the Dixon entrance. Northerly winds in the Lynn Canal at 25 knots with 5-foot seas expected, 30 to 35 across the northern Gulf Coast. As we get into Thursday, a stronger onshore flow develops. You can see higher seas here south of Port Alexander and Sitka, all the way from 35 to 40 knots sustained with 33 to 37-foot seas expected there. Winds on the inside not as bad, but the northern winds across the Lynn Canal continue southeasterlies inside the Clarence Strait are expected there, 30 knots with a 14-foot sea. Across south central, we're going to have kind of a rough time around Prince William Sound as well as areas in the northern Gulf. 25 to 30 knot winds expected from the west and southwest with 10 to 16-foot seas. Northwesterlies light in northern Cook Inlet, westerlies onshore and strong across southern Cook Inlet all the way through the Kenai Peninsula at 30 knots with a 10-foot sea there. Thursday, conditions improve in Cook Inlet anywhere from 10 knots or so all the way from the northern end into the Barrens. But once you get back into the Gulf, you're looking at 20 to 30 knot winds and 9 to 14-foot seas. Northwesterlies still going strong inside of Prince William Sound at 20 knots with a 3-foot sea Thursday. For southwest inside of Bristol Bay, a westerly wind at 30 knots with a 7-foot sea is expected. Higher seas as you move down the coast with 40 knots and 15-foot seas there for Wednesday. Around Kodiak Island, expect 25 knots from the west and northwest, 7-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and 13 to 14-foot seas down the coast there, all the way from AKwx down towards Sand Point. 13 to 14-foot seas are expected there. As we get into Thursday, you'll notice westerlies pretty much lining up across the board, 25 to 30 knots with 11 to as high as 15-foot seas on the map, 8-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, 4-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait with a southwesterly wind at 15 knots. Across the central and western chain, expect winds anywhere from 20 to as strong as 40 knots there. Some of those just north of Nikolsky and Unalaska with a 13-foot sea. 14 to 19-foot seas there from Nikolsky westward, Adak, and a west to northwesterly wind. 21 to 23 foot there as you get into Wednesday afternoon. Notice a lot of changes in the wind direction here for Thursday as one low pressure system's leaving and the next one is moving in. So this is going to start drawing more air in from Adak and Atka out toward Kiska, and you can see that easterly flow developing there. 25 to 30 knots with 8 to 12-foot seas. Still dealing with the westerly flow across the region pulling into the Gulf. This system here has 15 to 25 knots with 9 to 11-foot seas. 13 to 14-foot seas are on the Pacific coast, so a lot going on there Thursday and Friday. For the west coast, northerlies coming off the mainland there, 15 to 30. It's going to be cold. West and northwesterlies from Nunivak Island down toward the Pribilofs, you're looking at about 25 to 30 knots. 9 to 12-foot seas expected there on Wednesday. As we get into Thursday, 15 knots over the ice for Norton Sound. Northerlies coming in through St. Matthew, Nunivak Island down toward the Pribilofs at about 25 to 30. Expect 9 to 12-foot seas there on Thursday afternoon. For the North Slope, north and easterly winds over the Beaufort, 15 to 20. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi, 20 to 30 with anywhere from 7 to 9-foot seas expected. 10-foot seas for the Bering Strait. As we get into Thursday, winds diminish a little bit for the Beaufort, still going for the Chukchi coast over the open waters, 15 to 30 knots and 6 to 9-foot seas expected through the Bering Strait region and over that marginal ice we were just looking at. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather advisories continue for St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, with wind chill advisories around Point Lay and points southward of that and around Anaktuvuk Pass for values of 50 to 55 below. That'll go through most of Wednesday. For areas around Anvik, expect a storm total of 4 to 7 inches, and winds will be coming up in southeast as the next weather front moves its way through your region Wednesday and into Thursday, as we just saw on the maps, and snow continues across southern regions. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.